Thank you all for joining us today. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm Raymond Karam, the Chief Program and Development Officer here at AGSIW. Thank you for making the time to join this virtual roundtable that is part of what we're calling GCC Week here at AGSIW, commemorating the 40th anniversary of the establishment of the Gulf Cooperation Council. We're truly honored to have with us His Excellency Dr. Nayef Al-Hajraf. His Excellency was appointed Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council on February 1st, 2020. Previously, he was sworn in as Kuwait's 19th Minister of Finance on December 12th, 2017. He has more than 15 years of experience in public and private sector management, education, and financial consulting. Prior to his appointment, Minister Al-Hajraf served as the chairman of the board of commissioners and managing director of the Kuwait Capital Markets Authority from 2014 to 2017. He previously also served as Kuwait's Minister of Finance for a brief period in 2012 and Minister of Education and Minister of Higher Education from 2012 to 2014. He was also a member of the first Board of Commissioners of the Capital Markets Authority in 2010 and a member of the Supreme Petroleum Council. Minister Al-Hajraf, Secretary General Al-Hajraf, holds a PhD in Accounting and Finance from University of Hull, United Kingdom. Moderating the discussion today is AGSIW President Ambassador Douglas Silliman. He previously served as U.S. Ambassador to Iraq from 2016 to 2019 and U.S. Ambassador to Kuwait from 2014 to 2016, among other distinguished postings at the United States Department of State. And with that, Ambassador Silliman, over to you.
Raymond, thank you very much for that introduction. As the GCC this week begins the start of its 5th decade of work, it is our great honor to have today Dr. Nayef Al-Hajraf. He is no stranger to AGSIW. He has participated in our programs before when he was the finance minister of Kuwait, but we thought that today was a particularly apt time to bring him in for a discussion of the past, the present, and the future of the Gulf Cooperation Council. So Dr. Nayef, ahlan wa sahlan, we're very pleased to have you with us today. When we last met in February of 2020 in Riyadh, before the pandemic started, while we could still travel around, you mentioned to me that you saw your role as the Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council as highlighting the accomplishments of the members of the GCC and the global role of the states of the GCC. You mentioned Saudi Arabia's hosting of the G20 in 2020, Expo 2020 in the UAE, which is now Expo 2021, the FIFA World Cup in Qatar in 2022, and Kuwait's hosting of the meeting of the International Sovereign Wealth Funds. My first question to you is, has the pandemic, or has your first year in office as the Secretary General changed your view of the GCC or of your role as the leader of the GCC?
Thank you, Ambassador Siliman, and thank you for all the participants. And I'm very delighted and honored to be with you this morning, Washington time. I was recalling the plan that I put together between November 2019 and February 2020. This is the transition period when I was nominated to become the 6th Secretary General of the GCC. My time was supposed to start on April of 2020, and for some circumstances, this has been brought forward to start on February 1st, 2020. No idea about COVID-19 at that time. When I go back to this mini plan, if I may so, it was covering the first 100 days as Secretary General, so I get the time and the chance to know my staff and the people working as Secretary General, and also the priorities for the GCC. Well, me and my small team, we put a plan for everything, despite COVID-19. And just 45 days later, when we were in mid of March, when the lockdown took place and all the traveling bans and all the stories that unfold by then, we found ourselves leaving this mini mini plan and focus on the urgent situations that we found ourselves as the rest of the world are facing. And this is probably one of the most important period of time. We were debating whether how can we continue business as usual without affecting the working of the Secretary General. There is about 1,200 people working with the Secretary General. However, with the lockdown, we have a team of 15 that keeps things moving. During the 2020, we found ourselves forced to address the most urgent issues. And when I say the most urgent issues, it was three main topics. One, the health, and how can we collectively face the pandemic and all the consequences that might affect the health service and people who are in the front row dealing with the pandemic. Two, how can we collectively address what will come next and be prepared for that through understanding what's going on in the world and try to exchange our views and experience with our friends across the globe. We need to show solidarity with the rest of the world. We can't be isolated, and we don't want to be isolated during this critical time. And the third topic was, what are the economic consequences? Because I strongly believe that the pandemic started as a health issue, but the consequences will be on all different aspects of life. We have seen the disruptions of the supply chain. We have seen the closure of many factories across the globe. We have seen shutdown of many businesses. And I can easily understand that this will come at a cost. Yet we need to be prepared. What are the costs for all of this? No one can anticipate at that time how deep the situation is and how wide the market has been affected. Yet there is a lot of reports that came through that time at the very beginning of the pandemic. But things were moving because things are changing on an hourly basis. So these were the three main focus. At the same time, I found that I have to go and read with all the literature that's been within the GCC that's covered the 40 years since the establishment. So I looked into all the minutes, all the reports, all the discussions that took place in different viruses. So it was the time for two things: updating the work related to COVID-19 and all the three different areas in which we were focusing on, and at the same time, spend more time reading and try to understand precisely how the mechanism works within the Secretary General. I can't do this without the help I have from my staff as well as from the member states. During the 2020, although there has been no in-presence meetings, we managed about 730 virtual meetings. And the number that's much no other years over the last 40 years. And believe it or not, I found the virtual meetings being very constructive and very efficient because we book 2 hours, for example, with a clear agenda, and we go through it precisely and more professional way. We have also established a data room that meets every Saturday to get the latest situations for the pandemic, and this data room is presents from the health officials in the 6 member states. They're still meeting every Saturday, every week, And we received a daily update on all the new cases within the GCC countries every day at 5 p.m. So these were the urgent issues that force itself on our agenda, but at the same time, we still look in the GCC the way we discussed it in February. We set an example of how we can work among us, and also we set an example on how we work with other international institutions and other friends and countries. We were in touch with the UN General Secretary, we were in touch with the World Health Organizations, we were in touch with the World Labor Organization, just to make sure that we are there and we offer our solidarity to the rest of the world in this very critical time that facing us as a human being.
So then, Dr. Nayef, it sounds to me that you feel the role of the GCC, excuse me, in the past year has really focused on coordination among your member states, but also coordination with other international organizations. How crucial do you think that the role of the GCC was in sparking cooperation among member states or between member states and the international community?
It was a core role, if I put it this way, Ambassador Silliman, because while officials and authorities are focusing on their domestic affairs, someone should look at the wider range. We have to look at the whole organizations and how can we communicate and coordinate between things. You know that the supply chain disruptions have caused some shortage and some essential products, and we want to make sure that the flow of the goods and products won't be affected. We managed to do that. At the same time, the traveling ban was coordinated among the GCC states. Also, Saturday we'll have a meeting with the Minister of Health to see what are the vaccinations passport, the health passport that we are introducing for GCC citizens to travel among the GCC countries. At the same time, we don't want to be seen not fulfilling our moral role with the rest of the world. You have seen the contributions that was made by member states to the World Health Organizations, to the countries that most need, and this will always be remembered during a crisis time. People will have to show solidarity because there is no exceptions. It's not one country that's been affected and the rest are not. It is something that we haven't seen in our lifetime, and I don't think it will be seen in our lifetime. But for the future generations, they have to see something. That's where we document all the activities and all the work that was conducted within the GCC over the last year, because we want to share it also with the rest of the world.
Well, I noted that before the Al-Ula Summit in January of this year, you did a number of press interviews, especially in Saudi media, where you talked about the economic integration projects of the GCC Common Market, the Customs Union, interconnected power grids, movement of labor, and movement of capital. What are your priorities for the GCC on the economic file as you move into the post-pandemic era? You said as your third issue is trying to help economies recover from the pandemic. What role do you see the GCC can play, and what role do you intend to play as the Secretary General?
The pandemic have shown us with no doubt that the world after COVID-19 will be totally different than the world before. So there is a new norm that we have to adopt. In order to adapting this new norm, we have to understand exactly what are the dimensions and how are the rest of the world looking at this. We have seen the economic agenda has become a priority not only for us at the GCC, but in November of 2020, we have seen the regional comprehensive economic organizations that was established. I think this is the name on November of 2020. That's led by China and 14 other Asian Pacific countries. This is an immediate reactions of how the world can work after the COVID-19. We at the GCC, we do have a lot of achievements. We do have the custom union in place. We do have the power grill in place. We do have also the union market with a target date 2025 to be completed. And these are very strong foundations in which we are building. I want to make this point very clear. We are not starting something from scratch. Over the last 40 years, there has been so many efforts that led us to where we are now. The 40 years wasn't really an easy ride. There has been ups and downs throughout the road, as you can imagine, but there is something fundamentally solid that we are building on it. So this now is moving with a follow-up mechanism. There is a team in place to finalize the custom union requirements. I can see that's more than 70%. It's in place, and now it's working. We do have some tactic issues that need to be addressed among the member states as well. The power grid is fully operated now, covering the whole 6 countries. We are now in advanced discussions with Iraq to provide the southern part of Iraq with 500 megawatt of the power grid. Also, we are in early discussions with Jordan to link them to we do believe that this is a very important and strategic project. For the union market, there is a lot of work has been conducted. There is 10 specialized areas there where groups are meetings to address these probably. We have achieved a lot in this, and we are racing against time from now until 2025. We do have the full support and guidance from the Supreme Council, and they are giving us a hard time to meet the deadline, and we are pushing everyone for that.
But one thing that you also mentioned in January in your press interventions was the praise for the creation of the Gulf Railway Authority, which has been a longstanding goal of the GCC to have easier logistics on land among the 6 states. So can you update us a bit on progress toward integrating rail lines and what timeline the GCC sees for the mostly completion of these projects?
Yeah, railway, the GCC Railway is a very strategic project as well. We do have a new concepts, if I may say, not only to establish the railway network, but also to make sure that it will be sustained down the road. This is a very strategic project. If I give you an example, the interstate trade now is about $90 billion US. That's according to 2019 numbers. The 2020 has been affected due to COVID-19, but it is $90 billion US as of 2019. We believe that with the railway network, this could be doubled or even tripled, because this will be used for goods and cargoes services. Now, we do have a go-ahead, and there is a permanent premises here at the headquarters in Riyadh for the Railway Authority that will be operated, I think, by November of this year. The first phase will connect Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and UAE by 2023, and there is a progress report. There is slightly delay in Kuwait and Oman. And of course, with Bahrain, we need the new castway to link Saudi Arabia and Bahrain. This probably will be seen sometimes in 2025, according to the plan. This is subject to change as things are changing on the ground, but these are the time frame we are working on it.
But it seems to me that the end of 2020 and 2021 saw a lot of potential movement on the economic front for the GCC. The Al-Ula Summit also brought some significant political news with the reintegration of Qatar more fully into the GCC and the Gulf community. So how has Qatar's reintegration affected the work of the GCC, either politically or on these economic projects that we are discussing?
Of course, Al-Ula Summit was a milestone that we have reached. And I would like to praise the wisdoms and visions of our leaders who brought us to this remarkable day, the 5th of January 2021. That's also in Al-Ula. That's a name that will always stay in our minds. Of course, the GCC rift has affected the work over the last 3 years and a half, no doubt in that. We tried not to affect, or we tried to eliminate the political dispute, if I may say, not to affect the rest of the work. And I can recall when I was Minister of Finance, we worked very hard with my colleagues in Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar to resume the meetings for the economic committee that comprised of the Minister of Finance of the 6 states, in which we did. Of course, this is a new era of the GCC with its new momentum that we'd like to build on. And things have been moving very satisfactory over the last 6 months or so since the Al-Ula Summit, and we're looking forward to continue.
Well, one of the hallmarks of the work of the GCC for the past 4 decades has been the way in which decisions are made. They are made unanimously by the leaders of the 6 member states. A question that I have, and this is more philosophical, I think, than practical yet, is does this make sense for the future of the GCC? For example, the European Union has some examples, such as the Schengen Immigration Treaty, the common currency, the euro, where countries either have to meet certain criteria or can opt in or out of them. Is there room in the GCC for projects and decision-making that are not unanimous among the 6 countries? Would that make your work more flexible, or would it make it easier for your member states? Or do you think it is better to continue on the same path to seek unanimity among all of the 6 leaders?
Well, I could say this in different aspects. The system works perfectly for us so far. And the leaders always have the time and to engage among themselves to address any subjects or matter they would like to address. It is different mechanism that was built on what is existing actually. You can imagine in 1981 when the GCC was established, it came from within the political system that was in a place at that time, and it just become an institutions. So it's still based on the same fundamental principles that governs the relation between the 6 states. Having said that, I have also to address the custodian of the 2 holy mosques visions that was, or initiative that was adopted anonymously by the member states in 2015. part of that vision is for any integration of projects under the GCC umbrella. It doesn't require that the whole 6 states to start from the same date. We go with whomever is ready, and we built in that. Give an example, the power grid started bilaterally, and then it's to grow organic. It has naturally as we move, and this also works perfectly because, well, there is some capacity for member states. That's not the case on other member states. So without delaying any integration projects that will have the benefit for all the member states, we have the go-ahead, and the rest will follow. And this works so far perfectly. At any time, there is nothing that cannot be changed, but we'd like to give it the time so it's come from within, so we can see it's not the change for the sake of the change, it's moving for a better mechanism that works for everyone.
While we are just discussing political topics, I'd like to take our first question from the audience from Dr. Greg Gauss from Texas A&M University, who's also a board member of AGSIW. He asked, can you tell us how the reconciliation of Qatar with the UAE and Saudi Arabia came about at the Al-Ula meeting? What was the process that was followed that brought Qatar back into the fold and culminated in that summit in Al-Ula?
Yeah, it was very simple, very straightforward. It was left for Qatar and each different states. I mean, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, and Egypt as well. And the Al-Ula agreement asked for the countries to deal with it bilaterally. Immediately after Al-Ula summit, there is engagement that took place in Kuwait, and there is opening of the borders and the flights, and this progress now is ongoing as we are speaking. There is, I'm sure, some issues that need to be addressed bilaterally, and I think this is the right way to address the differences. And so far we have seen an exchange visits, officials visits among the different states, and we are ready to give any support needed whenever it's needed.
Let me move a little bit more, go back to the founding of the GCC 40 years ago. I think it's generally agreed that much of the impetus, the reason for the founding of the GCC was the creation of the Islamic Republic of Iran and security concerns in the region, even though the founding documents of the GCC focus much more on administrative and economic cooperation than on security cooperation. Over the past 40 years, the GCC has gradually added security and intelligence cooperation, the Peninsula Shield Force, and other security aspects to it as well. Going forward, how important do you believe that security cooperation among the GCC member states will be a part of the GCC's work? And is there any area where you see there could be more improvement? Maritime security, missile defense, intelligence sharing, joint training of military or security forces, or any other areas that you see as possible in the near future?
Well, that's a very good question, Ambassador Silliman. And if you allow me, I just would like to go back for the 4 decades that we are now concluding. 1981, the formations of the GCC, just 2 years after the Islamic revolutions in Iran, and 1 year after the Iran-Iraq 8 years war. So it was an immediate threat to the security of the regions. So this probably accelerate somehow the formations of the GCC, although it was an idea that emerged since 1976. So the first decade was started with the war and the revolutions, in which we found our member states are a direct threat at that time. And then if you remember the tanker war, the blockage of oil tanks to go out of the Gulf, that's not affecting us as the GCC, as oil producers, but also the consumers as well, and the world economy. So they managed through that years. The first agreement that was signed with the GCC was the economic agreement. The GCC was established in May 25th of 1981. The economic agreement was signed in November 1981. But the formations of the Peninsula Shield was in 1984. Once the Iraq-Iran war reached an end, in which the GCC has played a significant role to adopt the UN resolutions for that, we thought that we could start a new decade without worrying about security issues. Yet, August the 2nd, 1991, we have faced a direct threat to Kuwait and to the GCC when the Iraq invaded Kuwait, and that's also unprecedented, and they have to face it. They manage that, and they move on. 2001, there is a new beginning, the third decade, and there was the 9/11 attack in New York. So the whole world was having one agenda, that targeting the terrorists and financing the terrorists and have to combat the terrorist activities, and in which we have fulfilled our duties, and we have proven that when it comes to terrorists, it's an activity that crosses the borders, has no identity, it cannot be linked to any ethnicity, any religion. And 2011, the fourth decade, was the Arab Springs. Also, it was an immediate threat to the GCC, yet we managed to go through this very tough time. Now we are in 2021. The world is facing COVID-19. COVID-19 is all of the above. So it is security, it is economic, it is social, it is education, you name it. So security always will remain an issue. Security cannot be seen in isolations of what's going on within the region. There is fundamental beliefs that the sixth state security is totally 100% integrated. The threat is not the traditions anymore. There is a new threat. There is a drones, there is missiles, targeted missiles, there's ballistic missiles, in which we have to deal with it. The military integrations is going according to the plan that was approved, and the exchange of informations and intelligence informations is going with our friends and allies. And this always will be an issue, because if we are moving toward master development plan that can be seen in any GCC member states, this should have a protection in one way or another. So one way of how to protect what we have achieved is by working collectively, because there is a holistic security approach that link the whole six states together and cannot be seen in isolation, and it will continue this way.
Thank you very much for that answer. And Ambassador Jerry Firestein from the Middle East Institute has anticipated my next two questions on my list. The first one stays in the security realm. There is now a major international effort to try to end the war in Yemen. And just this week, U.S. Secretary of State Tony Blinken praised Saudi efforts to bring the war to an end and criticized the Houthis for their Marib offensive and the unwillingness to cooperate with the international community. What role do you think the GCC can or should play in helping bring an end to the war in Yemen, and then potentially afterwards to help redevelop or bring Yemen closer to the standard of the rest of the Arabian Peninsula?
Well, I don't think we can see the conflict in Yemen without looking into the three main principles of which the situations will be solved. One, it is the GCC initiative, which was put forward in 2011, and its implementations mechanism. Two, it was the Yemeni national dialogue and the outcome of this dialogue. And three, the UN Resolution 2216. And since then, we are fully engaged with the situation in Yemen. We were hoping that from 2011, we had a GCC mission to Yemen, but everyone knows what's happened in 2015 when the Houthi just went against the legitimate governments, and this was not accepted. So there is the Arab coalition to restore the peace and the legitimate governments in Yemen. We work very closely with the UN envoy, the outgoing UN envoy, Martin Griffith, and two other envoys before him. I met him yesterday, actually. And we are looking to continue working with the new UN envoy. We welcome the move by the new administrations in Washington by appointing a special envoy to Yemen, whom I've met. Also, we discussed a common agenda. And we also, lately, we have seen the Saudi initiatives to reach a ceasefire in Yemen, initiative that welcomed by everyone except Al-Houthi. We strongly believe that there is no solution in Yemen other than the political solution. This is why we are trying to push everyone to engage in a very constructive way in this initiatives and try to work for the benefit of Yemen and Yemeni people and no other ones. Yemen always will be at the top of our agenda. Restoring the security in Yemen is very strategically important for the GCC. We do have decisions from the Supreme Council to organize an international conference to rebuild Yemen, but there is a prerequisite for that. It is the starting of the political dialogue among Yemeni people. No one should be left out of this dialogue. Everyone should be engaged. We do have a lot of workshops that organize with international organizations as well as with some development funds within the region. We try to have a master plan how to work for the Yemeni people, how to help them after the peace agreement has been reached. It is not an easy task, I have to admit this, but we never lose faith that this should be, at one day, this should be the reality that we should handle. We hope that the Houthi will realize what they are doing, and we hope that the Houthi will put the priority of the Yemen and Yemeni people at their top of their agenda and try to act in this one. I know the negotiation and the envoys are working very hard, and we are always hoping that we will reach a deal to end the 7 years conflicts that will help no one, and the Yemeni people are suffering the most.
Well, some have suggested in the past that bringing Yemen into the GCC in some way, including potentially full membership, could be a help. But there has been a lot of discussion in the past 40 years of broadening the membership of the GCC, with formal processes started with Morocco and with Jordan to see the complementarities of regulations and economics and discussions about what less than full membership might be available for neighboring countries like Iraq or Yemen. So where is the GCC now on the issue of the expansion of the GCC to other countries in the region, or in the case of Morocco, much farther away? Is this under active consideration, and what might be required for Jordan, Morocco, Yemen, or Iraq, or other countries to be included in some way formally in the GCC? I guess I should add Egypt to that list as well, given the recent very strong cooperation with Cairo.
We made it very clear from day one that the GCC, it's also written in the Article of Association, that we are there, the GCC is there to support the wider Arab countries and to enhance the world and global security and under the umbrella and the article, the Charter of the UN. Just after Al-Ula Summit, I visited Jordan, Iraq, and Egypt. I've met with the Yemen presidents in Riyadh, and I have virtual meetings with Moroccan foreign ministers. The objectives of these visits is to reassure these countries with our positions at the GCC to support the wider security and developments in the region. With Iraq, we do have an MOU that was signed in 2019, and because of that COVID-19, we couldn't activate. So my visit to Baghdad was to assure people of Iraq that we are ready, and there is an engagement now in different aspects. The Power Grid is one of the areas in which we are working on it. My visit to Jordan, as you know, Jordan and Morocco, we do have a strategic relation with them, and there is a lot of subcommittees that are addressing different issues, particularly in economic and development issues, and there is work in progress. I visited also Jordan again during Ramadan just 2 weeks ago, and this just to show how important this relation. With Egypt, I visited Cairo. I've met with His Excellency the President Sisi and the foreign ministers as well. And Egypt is a very important for the world and the Middle East security and stability. We have seen the effort that led by Egypt to calm the tension in Gaza last week, and Egypt always will be a strategic alliance to the GCC. The same message was sent to Yemen. Yemen is an active member in 8 organizations that works under the umbrella of the GCC, 8 out of 31. They have all the activities they are engaging on different committees with us. And we strongly believe that the GCC is there to stabilize the region, as we strongly believe that we do have this kind of obligations and we can't do it alone. We have to do it with our neighboring countries, because the region is facing a lot of challenges that can only be addressed collectively and by consulting with our neighboring countries.
So I'm going to turn again to some of our questions. I've got 3 very good questions from Mohammed Baharoun from Bahuth in Dubai. I'll read them out, and I guess you can figure out which of the 3 very different ones you want to respond to. Multilateral organizations now are facing a lot of challenges and failing at many of them. I think particularly as nationalism or populism grows in many parts of the world. How do you assess the future of the GCC in light of these challenges? Second question, what are the areas of cooperation between the GCC and the United States? And does the GCC have any role in issues like the renegotiation or discussions on the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action or any other strategic or bilateral cooperation with the United States. And finally, as GCC member states begin discussions with Iran, is the GCC taking any role or should the GCC take a role to consolidate or to create a common framework for discussions with Iran? So again, three very good and complicated questions from Dr. Mohammed.
Okay, Dr. Mohammed, I'm sure he follows what's going on in this region from his positions as Director General for Buhuth. And Buhuth is an Arabic word that is translated to studies and research, I think, research. I probably will go with the Iran questions, which I think is very important. I have been asked this question so many times, and we at the GCC strongly believe that the security of this region is the responsibilities of all its people. And Iran will always be a neighboring country. We cannot change geography. We cannot change history. And in 2016, there is a letter sent by the GCC countries by the late Emir of Kuwait, Sheikh Sabah, to Iran, indicating our willingness to engage in a very constructive way to address all the, or to have a dialogue in order to understand each other's more and to understand what's going on on the region. Things went very well after that's initiatives. But the attack on the Saudi Arabia consulate brought us back to square number one. A behavior that's cannot be tolerated and cannot be accepted in any way or another. We should have some goodwill in order to move forward. And the goodwill always is something that can be felt, can be seen. And what we are asking for at the GCC, that Iran should comply with international law and the UN Charter and the Security Council resolutions, stop interventions on domestic affairs, respecting sovereignties, stop supporting terrorist activities or militias groups. As of now, this is not the case. We have demand that any renegotiation for the JCPOA should include and take into account our concerns. We do have a legitimate concerns of the Iranian nuclear programs. We do have our concerns of their capability for missiles, ballistic missiles and their drones, and also for the security of the Gulf. And 2015, a deal that was reached, welcomed by the GCC countries, because one of the justifications that was given at that time, that the JCPOA will moderate the behavior of the Iranian governments. And we, of course, welcome that. But now, after 6 years from signing the JCPOA, we could ask ourselves, what about the Iranian behavior since then? I don't think it has shown any improvement from creating issues among the regions. I mean, we've seen their influence in Iraq, in Syria, and Lebanon, and in Yemen. That's just an example. And I mean, it cannot be accepted for the GCC countries to remain silent with some activities, aggression activities like this. We have seen targeting Saudi Arabia on a daily basis. We are here in Riyadh. We have sometimes been targeted. And this all came from the support, the Houthi militias backed by the Iranian missiles. I'll give you an example. Now there is discussions going on in Vienna, and the reports coming sometimes in different directions. When the North Korea program, nuclear program, was an issue, there was a discussions among 6 states: the United States, Russia, China, South Korea, Japan, and North Korea. These are all the neighboring states of North Korea. So they have their concerns of having a neighboring countries with a nuclear capability. So they have to put their views on this. And we cannot see a negotiation to revisit the JCPOA without taking into account the neighboring countries of Iran. So this is where we demand, and this is what we have discussed with all our friends. The B5+1, the E3, and we still think that any negotiation regarding the nuclear programs of Iran should include all their activities and should address their behavior on destabilizing the region. We see ourselves as the stabilizers of the region, and we have to act in this way.
Thank you, Excellency, for that very comprehensive answer. I want to move back to the economic sphere with a question from our good friend John Duke Anthony. It's sort of 2 parts. The first part is there have been discussions in the past between the GCC and the European Union regarding some sort of a free trade accord. There seem to have been informal discussions with the United States. So the first question is, where do those ideas stand? And secondly, have you engaged in other conversations with other parts of the world, whether it be East Asia or South Asia, to talk about similar free trade or trade facilitation agreements with other organizations or countries bilaterally?
As I said, the world after COVID-19 will be totally different than the world before. One of the main areas in which countries can cooperate, either bilaterally or unilaterally, is through economic engagement. FTAs is part of the requirements. The Al-Ula Summit has indicated 6 countries in which we have to resume the FTA negotiation: China, India, Pakistan, New Zealand, Australia, and the United Kingdom. These are the priorities now. I will add to this the European Union, because the negotiation with the European Union went for so long, and now there is real interest from both sides to resume this negotiation. We are working very closely with the European Union ambassador here in Riyadh, and there is technical group meetings that took place over the last few months. We have received so many foreign ministers from the European Union, and this is always part of our discussion agenda. So these are the priority for now. At the same time, we still have an economic or trade preference with other countries in which we are working, the Asian Pacifics and the EFTA and other countries in Africa and South America.
The next question is from Dr. Kristen Smith-Dewan from AGSIW, a senior resident scholar with us. She asks, as the Secretary General, you have mentioned that the GCC has accommodated the idea of bilateral integration among member states, and we've seen a lot of bilateral cooperation among member states of the GCC, backed by coordination councils, bilateral coordination councils, particularly between Saudi Arabia and the UAE, but there are other examples as well. To what extent do these bilateral relationships affect the GCC and its structures, or have you seen it? Does it help the work of the GCC? Does it supplant the work where people work bilaterally instead of through the GCC? And how do you see this going into the future?
No, it's just making our task easier because we are building, it's very integrated. I mean, we cannot isolate the bilateral coordinating activities between, let's say, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, and other member states bilaterally. It will add up to the effort of the GCC, and it will serve the same purpose. We very much welcome this kind of cooperations, and we are engaging in this kind of activities with the institutions and authorities that conducting some of these tasks that's been discussed.
I think we'll take our final question now from Majdi Ramadan, who says that he will wear his Lebanese hat for this question. And he said that in the past, starting as far back as 2011, there was a real historic partnership between the GCC and Lebanon and significant assistance. But in the current crisis, a lot of that assistance has gone away. Do GCC countries realize the importance of direct involvement in Lebanon by the GCC and by the member states as Lebanon is trying to deal with a very difficult set of both regional and internal problems? And what do you see as the future of GCC cooperation or involvement with Lebanon economically or politically?
Well, I would like to take the opportunity to send my regards to all the Lebanese people across the world, not only in Lebanon, but everywhere. The first country that GCC signed an FTA with was Lebanon. This for the record. Yet, I think there is a lot of work need to be done, not by the Lebanese people, but by the elite, the political elite class. They have to put the benefit or the interests of Lebanon as an independent state, not influenced by any other regional power first. It is with a great sadness that we've seen the explosion that took place in last August and Beirut port. Immediately, the 6 member states have sent medical support and assistance because the Lebanese people deserve the best. Yet everyone realize what is needed to be done in Lebanon, except those who have the power and decision to take. We support the stable Lebanon. We support an independent Lebanon. We support Lebanon all the way. I think the elite people, the political parties need to realize that what they are doing is won't help Lebanon, and the world cannot help if people are not helping themselves.
Your Excellency, Dr. Nayef Al-Hajraf, thank you very much for spending this time with us today. Thank you for helping us commemorate the 40th anniversary of the creation of the GCC, but more importantly, to look at its future and how it might help peace, prosperity in the region. We really appreciate your coming and using AGSIW as your platform. For our audience, this has been recorded. We will put this interview, this discussion up on our website, www.agsiw.org tomorrow. I'm sure you'll see it on Twitter and other platforms as well. So, Excellency, thank you very much for taking your time and for being with us today.
Thank you, Douglas. Regards to you and all the lovely staff of the Arab Gulf States Institution in Washington, D.C. And we hope that our next meetings will be in person, either here in Riyadh or in Washington, D.C.
Inshallah. I'll also remind our audience that tomorrow at the same time, we will be conducting a panel discussion, again, on the 40th anniversary of GCC as part of our GCC Week commemoration. Dr. Nayef, shukran jazilan, ma salama.
Thank you.